You are unwanted.
You're unwanted. Elara didn't bother to lower her voice. The court has agreed on that much. The words cut cleanly through the music, through the low murmur of noble conversation, through Julia's last fragile illusion that tonight might pass without incident. A few heads turned, a few lips curved. Most people pretended not to hear. Which was worse? Julia stood very still, because stillness had been survival once, and habit lingered long after necessity. Her hands were folded at her waist, fingers interlaced tightly enough to ache. She did not look at her sister. She did not need to. She could picture Elara perfectly, poised, polished, beautiful, in a way the world had always rewarded. Cruelty, worn like silk. The grand assembly hall glowed around them, obscene in its splendor. Two crystal chandeliers dripped golden light from the vaulted ceiling. Marble floors reflected wealth back at itself. Banners of ancient wolf bloodlines hung heavy against the stone walls, embroidered with power, lineage, and belonging. None of it was meant for her. Elara stepped closer, her crimson velvet gown whispering softly, the rubies at her throat catching the light like fresh blood. Honestly, she continued, smiling as if sharing a private joke, I don't know why you came. Watching you pretend you belong is embarrassing. Julia felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Not pain, she had learned how to dull that, but the deeper ache of being seen only to be diminished. Around them, the court flowed on. Laughter rippled. Glasses clinked. Wolves brushed past in silk and tailored coats, their attention sliding over Julia like she was part of the architecture, present but irrelevant. Her father stood several steps away, speaking with a council elder. His posture was rigid, his expression carefully neutral. He did not look at her. He never did when Elara spoke like this. Silence, Julia had learned, was a choice. You should be grateful Father allowed you inside at all, Elara murmured now, pitching her voice just low enough to feel intimate. Half-bloods don't usually get invitations to claiming ceremonies. The word half-blood settled like ash. Julia swallowed. She had spent her entire life carrying a truth no one would fully name. Her mother's humanity was spoken of only in whispers, human, weak mistake. A stain that clung to Julia no matter how quiet she became. I won't cause trouble, Julia said softly, but her voice did not shake. That alone felt like victory. I'll leave before the ceremony begins. Elara laughed, a gentle sound that made nearby nobles smile without knowing why. Oh, Julia, she said, no one would ever claim you. That, at least, was something Julia already knew. She stood near the outer columns, just inside the threshold of the hall, exactly where she had been told to stand. Close enough to be included, far enough to be forgotten. Her dress, borrowed from a seamstress in the lower quarter, brushed her ankles when she shifted her weight. Pale blue linen, simple, carefully mended, clean. It fit. This morning, when she had seen herself in the mirror, she had dared to think she looked almost pretty. Now, surrounded by jewel tones and effortless luxury, the fabric felt thin, apologetic, like her presence. She told herself what she always did: endure. Don't hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made you visible. And visibility, for someone like her, only invited correction. Fragments of memory surfaced unbidden, scrubbed floors, whispered arguments behind doors, her mother's laughter fading from the house long before her body ever did. Julia had learned early how to make herself small, how to survive without asking for more. She had once believed that if she endured long enough, something might change. It hadn't. Loneliness, she reminded herself, was not a punishment. It was simply the way of things. She would leave before the claiming ceremony, slip away while the court was distracted by music and power and destiny, return to the edges where she belonged. Nothing was ever going to change. That was when it happened. Not a sound. So not a voice. A sudden warmth bloomed low in her chest, uninvited, impossible, as if something ancient had reached out and found her at last. Julia inhaled sharply, fingers curling against her skirt. Her heart stumbled. Whatever this was, it was not meant for her. And yet, it refused to let go. If you think this is where her story ends, you're wrong. Keep watching. The warmth did not fade. Julia stood where she was, breath shallow, her pulse loud in her ears, waiting for the strange sensation to pass. It didn't. Instead, it spread, slow and deliberate, like heat seeping through stone. Awareness sharpened her senses until every sound felt too close, every movement too loud. Something was wrong with her. That was the first sensible conclusion. People like Julia did not feel sudden awakenings or destiny-touched moments. They endured. They survived. They kept their heads down and their expectations low. Her fingers curled against the fabric of her skirt as the warmth tightened, pulling, not forward, not backward, but inward, as if something deep within her had recognized a call her mind could not yet understand. Across the hall, laughter faltered. It wasn't dramatic. No music stopped. No voice rose in alarm. It was subtler than that, the way posture shifted before thought caught up, the way conversations dipped half a breath too early, the way wolves who had once laughed too loudly now straightened, instincts prickling. Julia didn't know why the air felt heavier. She didn't know that a man who had rejected 17 noble daughters that evening had just gone very still. Mark stood beneath the black-bannered gallery, his expression unreadable, and his attention sharpened to a single point in the vast room. He had listened to rehearsed charms and calculated smiles for hours, felt nothing stir, nothing answer. Duty had brought him here. Habit had kept him standing. Then something had pulled. He did not question it. He stilled, and the court, without understanding why, made space. Julia felt it before she saw him. The pull intensified, a quiet insistence drawing her gaze left. When her eyes finally lifted, they found him already looking at her. The world narrowed, sound dulled, color softened. Time stretched thin enough to feel fragile. Julia forgot to breathe. He was not dressed like the others. His dark coat bore no ostentatious jewels, no bright sigils. Power clung to him anyway. Unmistakable, restrained, worn the way a blade was worn by someone who knew exactly how sharp it was. His gaze did not slide past her. It held. Something in Julia's chest cracked open. No one had ever looked at her like that, not with hunger, not with disdain, but with focused attention, as if she were a question worth answering, as if she existed. The warmth surged, and this time she staggered a half-step back, catching herself against the cool stone of the column. He noticed. That, more than anything, startled her. Mark moved. He did not push through the crowd. He did not ask. Wolves stepped aside without realizing they had done so, their bodies responding before their minds could form objections. Silk brushed stone. Whispers died mid-sentence. Julia felt the pressure of his approach like a gathering storm. When he stopped in front of her, the space around them felt quiet. "You look like you're about to flee," he said, his voice low, edged with something like amusement. Not mocking. Curious. Julia blinked. "Am I that obvious?" A corner of his mouth curved. "Only to someone paying attention." Her breath caught. "Then perhaps you should stop." He considered that. Perhaps, but then I'd miss the reason the room feels off-kilter. She frowned despite herself. "The room feels fine." "Does it?" His gaze flicked briefly over the court, the forced smiles, the rigid posture, before returning to her. "You don't look fine." She huffed a quiet laugh before she could stop herself. "Neither do you." That earned her a real smile. Quick, genuine. He didn't ask her lineage, didn't comment on her dress, didn't glance toward the banners that marked status and worth. His attention remained fixed, steady. "What's your name?" he asked. Julia hesitated. Names had power, and hers had rarely been used kindly. Julia. He repeated it slowly, as if testing the shape of it. Julia. The warmth in her chest settled, aligned. You don't belong on the edges, he said. She looked past him, at the glittering court that had never made space for her. That's where people like me are placed. People like you, he echoed, thoughtful. Resilient. Quietly strong. Still standing after being told you shouldn't exist. Her throat tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, he said. He held out his hand. Walk with me. Fear flared, bright, instinctive. Every lesson she had ever learned screamed no. Don't draw attention. Don't invite consequences. But the warmth pulsed once, steady and sure. Julia stared at his outstretched hand, then placed her own in it, and followed him, heart pounding, unaware she was walking straight toward destiny. What happens when the man who sees her is more than he seems? Stay with me. The doors to the garden closed behind them with a soft, decisive thud. The noise of the grand assembly hall, music, laughter, the hum of power, fell away, as if someone had drawn a curtain across the world. Moonlight spilled over pale stone paths and low hedges, heavy with night-blooming flowers. The air was cool here, clean, safe. Julia didn't realize how tightly she'd been holding herself until her shoulders sagged. She inhaled deeply, the breath shuddering as it filled her lungs. It felt like the first real breath she had taken all night. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Mark released her hand, not abruptly, not reluctantly, simply giving her space. That, too, felt deliberate. Considerate. Disarming. You can leave if you want, he said quietly. I won't stop you. She turned to face him, surprised. Most men don't offer that. Most men, he replied, aren't listening. The moonlight caught his features, sharpening angles softened by the hall's golden glow. Here he looked more dangerous, more real, and yet the warmth in Julia's chest steadied, no longer frantic, no longer painful. What do you want from me? She asked. He studied her for a long moment, gaze intent, but unintrusive. I want to know why you think you don't belong in a room that rearranges itself around you. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped her. You're mistaken. That room has spent my entire life proving exactly where I belong. And yet, he said, you're still standing. The words struck harder than any insult. You didn't beg, Mark continued. You didn't rage. You didn't collapse. You endured. His voice lowered. That takes strength, the kind most people never have to develop. Julia crossed her arms, defensive despite herself. Endurance isn't the same as worth. No, he agreed, but it's where worth often hides. She shook her head. You don't know me. You don't know what I am. His gaze didn't waver. Then tell me. For a heartbeat, she considered lying. It would be easier, safer. But something about the stillness between them, about the certainty humming beneath her skin, made pretense feel useless. I've survived by being invisible, she said instead. By not wanting more, by accepting that I am less. His jaw tightened, not in anger, but in something sharper. Disapproval, perhaps. Who taught you that? She looked away. Everyone! Silence stretched between them, thick but not uncomfortable. Mark took a step closer, not crowding her, not demanding space. Simply present. Julia, he said, her name grounding, anchoring. You are not broken. She swallowed. You can't know that. I do, he replied. The warmth in her chest surged, no longer diffuse but focused, settling into something that felt right. You're my mate. The words landed softly. No thunder, no ritual, no spectacle, just truth. Julia stared at him, waiting for the rush of disbelief to fade, for the laughter, the cruelty, the inevitable correction. None came. Instead, fear curled cold in her stomach. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." His expression remained steady, certain. "It is." "You're wrong," she said, the words tumbling faster now. "You don't understand. I'm not—" She stopped herself, breath catching. "I'm half human." There, the confession she had carried like a brand her entire life. "I know," he said simply. Her head snapped up. "You what?" "I felt it," Mark replied. "The difference. The strength that comes from surviving between worlds." Her hands trembled. "My mother was human. She was weak. They say I'm a mistake, that I dilute the bloodline. They," he said calmly, "are wrong." She laughed shakily. "You can't claim me, not publicly, not once they know." "I can," he said. "And I will." She searched his face for doubt, for hesitation. Found none. "I've been searching for months," he continued. "A pull I couldn't name. I thought fate was mistaken. I thought it cruel." His gaze softened. "It wasn't. I was just late." The words cracked something open in her chest. Hope, dangerous, is unwanted, crept in despite her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Mark extended his hand again. "Now we return." The garden felt suddenly small. Julia looked back toward the doors leading to the hall, the court that had agreed she was nothing. Fear warred with something brighter, stronger. She placed her hand in his, and together they stepped back into the light. The court fell to its knees. The sound was unanimous. Knees striking marble echoed through the grand assembly hall like a single thunderous heartbeat. Julia froze. She stood just inside the doors, Mark's hand warm and steady around hers, staring as the entire court bowed, not to her, not yet, but to him. Noble wolves lowered their heads. Council elders bent stiff backs. Even those who had moments earlier laughed too loudly now knelt in instinctive obedience. The truth struck her all at once. This was not merely a powerful man. This was the man. Whispers rippled through the hall, urgent and shaken. "The Alpha King, Mark of the 5 territories. He's here himself." Mark released her hand only to step forward, his presence expanding, filling the room without effort. He did not raise his voice when he spoke. He didn't need to. "Rise," he said. They obeyed instantly. Julia's heart hammered as realization recontextualized every moment, the way the crowd had parted, the unease she'd felt before she ever saw him, the certainty in his gaze, the restraint, the silence. He had never needed to announce himself. Mark turned slightly, angling his body so that he stood beside her rather than in front of her. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable, protective, intentional. "I did not come tonight to observe," he said, "nor to entertain offers." Murmurs stirred again. "I came because something in this hall called to me long before I crossed its threshold." His gaze dropped to Julia. "I have felt my mate for months," he continued calmly. "Across borders, across bloodlines. I thought fate, mistaken." A pause. "It was not." Julia's breath caught. Then Elara laughed. It was sharp, brittle, and desperate. "This is absurd," she said, stepping forward, crimson skirts flaring like a challenge. "You cannot mean her." The court stilled. Elara's eyes burned as she looked between them. "She's half human," she announced, voice carrying now, eager, triumphant. "Her blood is tainted. Her mother was human, weak, mortal. She is not fit to stand here, let alone be—" Silence crashed down like a blade. Yet Julia felt the old fear rise fast and vicious, dragging memories with it. Whispers behind doors, looks of disappointment, the quiet certainty that she would always be less. The warmth in her chest faltered. This was it. This was where it always ended. She braced herself for the recoil, for the correction, for being set aside once more, publicly this time, unmistakably, for being a mistake. Then Mark laughed. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't mocking, it was genuine, unbothered, almost amused. "Is that all?" he asked. The court stared. Mark turned fully toward Ilara now, his expression sharpening. "You speak of bloodlines as if they are proof of worth. They are not. Power is not purity. Strength is not inheritance." He looked back at Julia, his voice lowering, softening, but somehow carrying farther than any shout. "You are everything," he said. At the warmth in Julia's chest surged back, stronger, steadier. "I claim Julia," Mark announced, turning to the court. "As my mate, as my queen." Gasps erupted. Shock rippled outward. "Any who challenge her," he finished calmly, "challenge me." The words settled like law. Julia's father stepped forward then, face pale, eyes fixed not on her but on the Alpha King. Slowly, reluctantly, he bowed. The gesture was stiff, stripped of pride. Ilara stared at him, disbelief flashing across her features before it collapsed into something uglier, something smaller. She took a step back as eyes turned on her, cold now, judging. The court had already decided. Julia stood very still as Mark placed a hand at the small of her back, anchoring her. She felt the shift, not just in the room, but in herself. She was no longer standing on the edges. She was at the center. As nobles knelt again, this time to her, Julia finally understood the truth. The court that had agreed she was nothing now belonged to her. And it always would. If you felt that moment, like this video, and subscribe for more stories, like this time did not rush after that night. It unfolded. The coronation was remembered as a spectacle. Golden banners replaced, ancient vows renewed, the Alpha King standing with his newly claimed queen at his side. But Julia remembered it differently. She remembered the quiet moments between ceremonies, the way courtiers watched her not with curiosity now, but with calculation and respect. She remembered realizing, slowly, that no one spoke over her anymore. She did not need to raise her voice. Julia ruled the way she had survived, by observing first. She listened more than she spoke. She learned the rhythms of the court, the fault lines beneath alliances, the way fear masqueraded as arrogance. Where others ruled with dominance, she ruled with steadiness. Decisions were measured. Mercy was deliberate. Justice was firm. And the realm responded. People who had once avoided her gaze now sought it. Not out of fear, but trust. They learned quickly that Queen Julia did not forget cruelty, but she did not reward it either. Letters arrived daily at first. Some were florid apologies, heavy with excuses. Others were brief, stiff, clearly written out of obligation rather than remorse. She read them all. She answered none. Ilara was not among the writers. Her sister's fall had been quiet. No trial, no spectacle. Stripped of influence, removed from court, and sent to live out her days among distant relatives where her beauty and sharp tongue bought her nothing. Julia did not order it. She did not need to. The court had learned. Her father wrote once. The letter was careful, restrained, and far too late. Regret pressed between the lines like a ghost. Julia held it for a long time before folding it away. Forgiveness, she had learned, did not require proximity. Some doors, once closed, were meant to remain that way. On an evening thick with the scent of rain, Julia stood on the palace balcony overlooking the city. Lanterns glowed below like scattered stars. The world felt vast, and finally, hers to care for. "You're quieter than usual," Mark said, joining her. She smiled faintly. "I was thinking." "That's dangerous," she laughed softly, leaning into him as his arm curved around her shoulders, solid and familiar. The warmth she had once feared now lived in her easily, a constant presence rather than a shock. "I used to believe," she said slowly, that being unseen was the same as being safe. Mark was silent, listening. I thought if I made myself small enough, the world would stop correcting me. She turned her head, meeting his gaze. I was wrong. He brushed his thumb across her knuckles. You were never small. I know that now, she said, but I needed to be chosen before I could believe it. His expression softened. You were always chosen. The world was simply late. Julia exhaled, the sound carrying years of weight she no longer bore. Below them, the city lived, unaware of how close she had once been to disappearing entirely. I wasn't unwanted, she said, more to herself than to him. Mark smiled. No. She straightened, shoulders back, gaze steady on the horizon. The court had once agreed she was nothing. Now she was queen. She was never unwanted. She had simply been waiting to be claimed. If you want more stories where the unwanted rise, subscribe and turn on your notification button. Let me know where you are watching in the comments section.